So, good morning. Moving on to week 9. And week 9, is the week before spring break. So, I think that's pretty great. First of all, as always, really want to commend your good discussion on the topics from last week. So, the prenatal period and infancy. And most of you honed in on, well, a couple of things. Most of you honed in on the prenatal period, exercise and diet, both of those critical factors, and the fact that there really is not much support given to pregnant women in regards to exercise. Thanks for the good examples of people who have both engaged in quite a lot of exercise, maybe more than most of us would consider a good thing for a pregnant woman running a marathon, but the fact that so many don't, I think there's a whole combination of factors, and Emmanuel really did a great job talking about the social determinants of health, which really need to be kind of in our consideration for almost any health issue at almost any age, is things like social support, the environmental support, certainly the biologic aspects of the person's metabolism, that sort of thing. But poverty, educational level, all those things are such an important variable in considering whether people will adopt or can adopt healthy behaviors. So that certainly affects exercise. But I think that y'all also identified an excellent point that often women are not counseled at all about exercise. And listening to your body is certainly sound advice, but usually the woman has to bring up if this is safe to do, or would the OB-GYN person or other provider recommend that they do this or that. Most women don't bring that up. For one thing, I think, just from my own experience, sometimes you don't feel the greatest at the very first, or you're really excited, of course, about the pregnancy. So, even though taking care of yourself is critical, and people are very conscious of not being exposed to things, maybe watching what they eat, now watching what they drink, not smoking, things like that. I think that they don't often put together the kind of important role that exercise and activity play. And then that just doesn't come back. It's not returned to discussion. A couple of you also mentioned, I think, Leah, the idea of gestational weight gain and diabetes, of course, which is a real risk during that period for people who perhaps are prone to that. Anyway, so we need to be much more conscious of advising women about weight gain. And even though women don't want to gain excessive amounts of weight, you are hungry, the metabolism has changed, that kind of thing. And if they don't have good counseling about that, the nutrition chapter 7, I think, does talk about recommendations for women who are pregnant or might become pregnant, but they're very pretty general. So I think women probably need a whole lot more guidance than that, and that might be something to think about as you work in your own APRN practices. If you work with women, pregnant women, or who may become pregnant, it might be great to have a FAQ about that, answering the common questions that women might have, or a website or a link to several resources that might be available. So really, really very good points. And then you talked a lot for the infant, which of course is very tied to the nutrition of the mother during the prenatal period. But for the infant, the discussion of breastfeeding was excellent and talked a lot about, the barriers and the facilitators to breastfeeding. More and more, I think, facilitators and more interest in promoting breastfeeding. We know that it's a WHO goal, a Healthy People goal, all of those things. Good point about ACA mandating that for companies of a certain size, there had to be a dedicated area for lactation that was private, not the bathroom, that kind of thing. You might have noticed on the UNC campus when you're there are some dedicated areas, but that's a university. It was very interesting to learn from some of your other posts that lower income jobs, women who work shifts by the clock, for instance, that kind of thing, there's much less support for breastfeeding. And if the woman herself is not committed, well, even if she is committed, it can be just a real difficult hurdle to overcome. Plus the equipment, plus maybe a place to put the breast milk if the person doesn't have a lunchroom area or any place that they feel is safe. They need to bring that as well, storage for the breast milk. So, these are real barriers to doing it. And then a great point about WIC, and two of you brought that up, Emmanuel and Jenny, I think, or Leah, about the fact that WIC often provides formula. There's formula in going home packs from the hospital. In so many other ways we subtly encourage formula use. So if a woman runs into some of the trouble that a couple of you mentioned with breastfeeding, it's pretty easy to turn to this, what they think is a simpler and maybe just as healthy solution for their baby. So, these were all great points, and I hope guide your practice as you work with pregnant women. And of course, as you provide the best nutrition for infants. So this week we're going to move on to toddlers and preschoolers. Same sort of format. You can choose one of the questions, either focusing on toddler or focusing on preschool. And I thought, besides nutrition and activity, and of course those are critical, children in general don't have too much trouble with being active without a whole lot of planning on the parents' part. But back to the social determinants of health, if there's not a safe sort of place that a mother or father can take the child to exercise, and perhaps they don't have a yard or whatever, then those are important considerations. But I also hope that some of you might consider focusing on stress, because stress is, and that's discussed in Chapter 8, talks a lot about the various sources of stress across the lifespan, certainly for all members, but for children, toddlers and preschool children, if there's violence perhaps in the community, if they're exposed to violence, certainly aspects of things like child abuse, those are important considerations in these age groups as well. So some of you might want to take that focus. So nutrition, activity, and stress, or coping, or prevention of stress or exposure to it. So we'll talk about those things. That will kind of finish us off for this part of the course prior to spring break. Your popular press papers are coming in, and I've seen a couple. I haven't finished that grading, but I'll be getting those back to you. And then you'll have a break, and I hope you enjoy that and have a little downtime. And then we'll resume our discussion in week 11, and we'll do school age and adolescence, then the young adult, and then in middle. I think I put those together, and then the older adult, and that'll kind of finish off the lifespan for our discussion. So hope you have a good week, and look forward to our discussion.